The hostages could be freed by Sunday. Mr. Trump is so sure he's flying to Israel for the weekend. Not that he's one, of course, to milk a success. Well, it's happening. Israel and Hamas have agreed a ceasefire, paving the way for an exchange of the remaining Israeli hostages, dead and alive, for Palestinian prisoners, and a steady flow of much-needed humanitarian aid. President Trump leaned hard on Israel, Arab governments on Hamas. The hostages could be freed by Sunday. Mr. Trump is so sure he's flying to Israel for the weekend. Not that he's one, of course, to milk a success. After 2 grim years, which have been catastrophic for Gaza's Palestinians and a military disaster for Hamas, but which have also left a victorious Israel exhausted and isolated, this counts as good news, at last. But it's important to realise we're talking about a ceasefire, not a peace deal. It is, of course, a major breakthrough, but the hard stuff has still to come. Israel will begin a partial withdrawal on the release of the hostages, but there will be no major pullback until Hamas agrees to disarm. And so far, that's been fudged. Then there's the creation of an Arab-led peacekeeping force to fill the vacuum, even when Israel withdraws and Hamas, in effect, surrenders. I'm not aware that even preliminary work has begun on the creation of such a force, or who would contribute to it. Yet without it, the Trump peace plan, which envisages an interim technocratic government to run Gaza and begin the immense job of reconstruction, cannot proceed. For without a force to ensure law and order in what is currently a wasteland, no civilian government could be deployed. There's also the tricky matter of Hamas agreeing that it can play no part in Gaza's future. On that, America and Israel are united. But Hamas is yet to give any indication it's prepared to depart the field. And then there's the Palestinian Authority, which has been making a hash of running the West Bank for years. It's being primed to take over Gaza at some unspecified time in the future, but not before it's undergone some pretty drastic reforms. That's no easy matter, since it's a corrupt gerontocracy that has steadily lost support among Palestinians. It's also hated by Hamas, which will be hardly keen to make way for it. So there's still a mountain to climb, and the peacemakers have barely made base camp. But peace can realistically come only one step at a time in the Middle East, and there will be times in the weeks ahead when it could fall apart or be faltering at best. But at least a start is being made. A ceasefire will likely be in place later today. The carnage will stop, at least temporarily. The remaining hostages are coming out. The humanitarian aid is going in. For all of which, much thanks. Flashes of light and a vista hitherto of relentless misery and gloom. Frankly, I wasn't sure the Trump plan would even get this far. I still have my doubts that it will go much farther. But so far, I've been wrong, and the president has been right. We should all hope it carries on that way. This is The Times at 1 with Andrew Neil. Let's go straight to the Times World Affairs editor, Catherine Philp. She's in the Middle East. Catherine, let's just get up to date here. Are we still on track for the ceasefire today and the release of hostages at the weekend? No last-minute stumbling blocks?
Not yet, Andrew. There's scheduled to be a cabinet meeting of the Israeli cabinet later on this afternoon, and that's the moment at which the deal will actually be formally ratified and the clock will start ticking. The first 24 hours of that are supposed to be this partial withdrawal from Israel that will open the ground for Hamas to gather together those living hostages at the very least and to release them within 72 hours. Now, at the moment, as far as you pointed out, this is only phase one of the deal, and it involves Hamas giving up its key bargaining chip, which is the hostages that it still holds. The last minute details that are being talked about between the sides now, when it comes to this phase alone, are about the identities of the Palestinian prisoners who will be released. Now, Hamas have been seeking the release of some high-profile figures that Israel does not want to release. This is really Hamas's only chance to get those people out because of the fact that it is giving up the hostages. So if there were to be a hitch at this stage, I think it would be on who those prisoners are.
Interesting. Well, still a few things there to work out. If the hostage release, prisoner exchange does take place, it gets over these problems, then the onus falls on Hamas in the next stage to disarm and renounce any future ambitions to run Gaza. Now, I know you're in the region, you've been talking to major players there. Do they expect that to happen?
It's not clear. And what is not clear is what really is meant by disarmament. I mean, there have been moves by Hamas, and there's been some willingness from some quarters of Hamas to hand over, to remove themselves from power and hand over to another Palestinian entity. What's not clear is how that entity will be made up. Are we talking about a process like de-Baathification, in which you remove absolutely every level of Hamas, right down to functionaries and administrative officials, or is it really just the top echelon who go? Are they amnestied? Do they have to leave the territory? All of these things remain ahead of us. Now, the question of disarmament, again, what is meant by that? It's just said as disarmament in the longer plan, of which there are 20 points. We've only really got to the first one or two. This, I think, from speaking to people in the Arab world and on the Palestinian side, they're more inclined to see this as a process by which Hamas could hand over their weapons either to a Palestinian entity or to that Arab force that you talked about, or even to the Egyptians, not to the Israelis. I think that would be symbolically incredibly hard for Hamas to do. So there has to be kind of some elegant face-saving way out of it, I guess, in which it doesn't look like they've simply given in to Israeli pressure. And again, all of this happens in the next stage once their really big bargaining chip is gone.
Well, as you alluded there, the Trump plan involves inserting a new peacekeeping force, presumably Arab-led, into Gaza. Is there any sign in the region that work has even started to create this force, or what it would consist of?
I'd say in a word, no. It feels a very long way off, and it is obviously a massive stumbling block. Now, a week ago, when this plan was unveiled in Washington, it was looked at as a comprehensive agreement. Of course, what has happened, rather unsurprisingly, is that both sides have felt they needed to sort of segment it in order to actually make any progress, with Trump leaning very heavily on both sides for there to be progress, for him to be able to show that something had happened. So again, this is part of what is down the road and is going to be far, far more complex than what happens in the next 72 or slightly longer hours.
It does seem, listening to you, that in some ways the peace plan, we've just got the headlines. There's no text. There's no,
yeah, absolutely.
After the headline, there's nothing.
Yes. And of course, the fears in the region are that this will look much like a previous attempt at peace under Trump, the first that he undertook when he came back to office in January. Now, that was a 3-part peace plan. And again, they never got past stage one. That time it was Israel that pulled out of it because it wasn't prepared to pull as far out of Gaza as it was being asked to. So it was Israel that sort of scuppered it last time. Now that sparked incredible domestic blowback for Benjamin Netanyahu because he hadn't got the hostages out. And so he gave up on the deal before they were back. And that has really hurt him domestically. His polls have been sinking. So the pressure on him to accomplish this phase one is very high because of that issue of the hostages. Whether there will be will on the side of part of Donald Trump to continue this process once the hostages are out, whether he's invested in the larger peace process and not just the hostages, we need to see whether Israel is prepared to make those concessions, and indeed Hamas, because this critical question of stepping aside and disarming has just not come up yet.
Well, you're right. Once the hostages are out, and that's, in a sense, it's a great thing to happen, but it's also the kind of the theatre of the event. Maybe Mr. Trump will lose interest after that. You mentioned this cabinet meeting, Israeli cabinet meeting taking place this afternoon. It needs that formal approval to proceed. Mr. Netanyahu has made that clear. There will be some in that Israeli cabinet that don't really want this peace plan. They want, I think, to annex Gaza. My understanding is that they will not get their way on that. But is there some danger for Benjamin Netanyahu, his government split, that down the road it might not survive the Trump peace plan?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got the objections you have already coming from the right wing about just phase one, so you have two controversial far right figures, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who will not vote in favor of this. Now, that's not enough to scupper it. It does look like it will go through, but they've made their objections clear, and they're already objecting to it on the grounds of the release of the Palestinian prisoners. Now, that's a small ask in a sense, if you look at how big some of the asks are down the road. Within this 20-point plan is supposed to be a pathway to a Palestinian state. Well, even Netanyahu says he's not up for that. So there are so many. It is a minefield, or a political minefield, even just simply on the Israeli side, without even looking at some of the issues with Hamas. So yes, his government will not fall this weekend, it doesn't look like, but it doesn't mean that they will survive.
No, he could be in some trouble down the road. And by down the road, I mean a couple of months ahead. Catherine, from everything you say, that even if we get stage one done, we get the hostages out, we get the humanitarian aid in, there is a ceasefire, which at least for some time stops the fighting. All the other things we've been talking about, I would think, but correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, almost impossible to put a timeline in any of that now.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think this is why it's been divided up in the way that it has, so that Trump can get this win, push the parties to something that really has happened quite quickly. If you think about how long things take in the Middle East, it's only a week, less than a week, actually 6 days since this was all presented in Washington. So he had urged, when Netanyahu was backing away and saying he wasn't keen on it, Trump said, take the win. And so the hope is that this essentially can create momentum somehow going forward. But I wouldn't like to put any dates or any deadlines on what happens after this.
No, I think that's probably the wise thing to do. Catherine, thanks for joining us today. I know how busy this day is for you. Catherine Philp there, the Times World Affairs editor, speaking to me from the Middle East.